it possible to live without stories? Can we call it life without stories? Is there stories which can lead us out of stories? It's not possible to live a life as a human without stories, because everything is a story. Like, let me just show off now. God, I hope I don't break anything. I'm in my mum's lounge. So say this, we could say, so how do we describe this without a story? There is just this happening. There is just that. Or we say, Lisa has amazing hand-eye coordination. Or we can say Lisa is a juggler. Or we could say, when Lisa was a child, she learned how to juggle. Or Lisa likes balls. Or Lisa has a fascination with oranges. Or, you know, there's so many different ways in which you could tell the story. I listened to Lisa's Ustream, and oh, yeah, it's dangerous with oranges. It's kind of hard doing it sitting down because you can't. You have to be very good when you're doing it sitting down, because when you're standing, if the balls go a bit out of line, you can move your body to. Whereas here, you have to kind of keep the balls very accurate. And what I'm trying to do is this one. Whoops. And that's a lot harder to do still. So you could say that she performed a show. You could say that she was a rubbish juggler. You could say she was a brilliant juggler. You could say she looked very happy when she was juggling. There's so many different ways in which you can describe events. So as a human, we're always doing that, and that's the way we communicate. I cannot describe things to Khaleesi like that. I can't say to her, look at that beautiful sunset. I can't say to her, do you know that when you eat chicken, you're actually eating a live animal? I can't say to her, do you like my jumper? Do you like my hair? None of these things. We can't have conversations about this. I can call her name and she responds. But as humans, we communicate these stories, and we put different sounds together in order to communicate an event or an happening. And that's also going to happen in thoughts. You know, when we're looking at our house and thinking about refurbishing it, we tell ourselves a story of how we want it refurbished and what we want it to look like. The same with, say, if we're going for a walk, we tell ourselves stories. And different societies do it differently. I loved learning about the Aboriginal culture, or some of the Aboriginal culture in Australia, that for them to learn their environment, rather than telling each other stories about their environment, they sung to each other their environment, and they knew their environment through songs, which I thought was really beautiful. I mean, to a bird, it most probably sounds like we're singing, but just a very like monotone song, like ba 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 ba. So it's impossible for humans to live without stories unless they're mute, unless they never learn a language. But our whole society is based on stories. Our whole society, it's the way it functions. So is there stories which can lead us to freedom? There are stories which can make us a more balanced, healthy human being, and through becoming a more healthy, balanced human being, and through your stories being more in line with reality, I feel then there can be space to be able to hear non-duality, which is beyond stories and which isn't a story. So I think that stories, we can tell ourselves more balanced stories. So most people believe that they're a separate individual and that they're living a separate life and that they're separate from their environment, and that's absolute nonsense. How can you be separate from your environment when you're having to eat all day in order to keep moving? I mean, that's a ridiculous story that you're a separate person, separate from everything. I mean, that's come from very basic stories, and as a society we're still holding on to that idea where science and everything is suggesting that's not the case. Constantly, the fact that we are always having to eat and drink, everything is doing that. Everything is living off each other. So that's a very simplistic story which as a society we're addicted to. So beginning to see that that story isn't true, and actually seeing that the more inline story is that we're all connected. We're all fundamentally connected. And actually we're not separate from each other at all. And we're all made of the same stuff. And seeing that there isn't actually somebody personally to blame, that everything comes from the past and everything is an infinite flow from whatever came before. And so whatever choices we make in the moment is based on everything else that came before. So there isn't actually really someone to blame. We as humans can take personal responsibility, but ultimately it's nobody's fault. And that again is really profound, beautiful story to tell yourself, and very different from what our current society believes. Our current society is very much into the blame and guilt game. If you don't practice, you're going to go to hell. If you don't practice to be a good Christian, you will go to hell. If you do this or that, you will go to hell. So that's very different from modern day thinking. So I think that having more healthy and balanced and more in line thoughts with reality, the person will relax more, and the person will settle down and become more balanced from understanding itself, from having a more balanced view. And then there's the possibility to see something which is beyond stories, something which cannot be communicated in stories. It can only be communicated in the instant. So really the real communication here is the presence, which is instantaneous. It's the very sound of the words. It's not the meaning of the words, and it's not the storytelling of the words. But the storytelling can relax that person, and then it can be seen, but not by that storytelling person. Because that person, the whole life of you, is a story tale and isn't reality. What's beyond that? Hi Lisa, the reincarnation topic is another story or belief. Everything is a story and a belief. You can't, hi Bia, you can't say that anything we tell ourselves in story is truth. There are stories that we tell ourselves that are more in line with reality, and ones that are further away from reality. And the ones that are further away from reality hurt more. Although they can be very exciting at points, they tend to then have like a scorpion sting. And the ones that are more in line with reality bring more peace. Like if I say, this is all there is, or this is love, maybe you can feel that. That's more in line with reality. But you can't actually put reality into words, because reality is prior to words. It's this breath inside a breath. It's this instant. It's before the words get interpreted into meaning. It doesn't mean that we don't use words, because that's what we do as humans. We speak to each other, we tell each other stories, like birds sing to each other. Is this presence felt or just sensed as words on a monitor? My presence and your presence. I feel your presence. You think you feel my presence, but it's actually life's presence. It's everything's presence. You can't feel an individual's presence, because there is no individual. But if you want to worship me and put it all on me, then everyone can say it's my presence. I have this high presence. It's in some way, you know, that's what also the role of the teacher is to be a mirror to that presence. Like you can kind of sense it, but it's not really belonging to someone.